So we're wrapping up this part of this day with the automotive industry, because how do you really sell cars online? Stuart and his team were tasked to bring Autotrader into the future, a legacy-rich company in a fairly traditional industry. Autotrader brought in the brain power and CX expertise from Thoughtworks to modernize their operations. And joining us from Manchester, please welcome Stuart and Maggie.
Okay, thank you for having us today. Maggie, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Maggie. I'm a principal product lead at Autotrader. I've been there about 4 years. I'm working with Stuart for about the last 18 months.
And I'm Stuart. I'm a principal design consultant with a company called Thoughtworks. We're here today to talk about modernising an automotive marketplace. This is a case study drawn from our experience of planning and delivering a CX modernisation strategy for Autotrader. We hope you find it interesting and relevant to some of the challenges that you all face. Our presentation touches on, I think, 3 of this year's conference themes. Firstly, decision-making and complexity. How do you make smart choices when balancing the needs of an automotive ecosystem whilst also improving decades of legacy technology? Secondly, cross-enterprise experiences. How to design coherent experiences across fragmented systems and journeys. And third, and probably most importantly, creating shared language and mental models. How to create clarity and alignment across different stakeholders with different vocabularies. Our presentation is in 2 parts. The first part provides the background, strategic framing, and some of the practices we used. The second part reflects on the implementation so far, after 18 months, and summarises some patterns we identified, things we learned, changes we made. Both parts inform each other, but depending on your role and interests, you might find one part more relevant than the other. I'll hand over to Maggie for the next one.
So probably good to start talking a little bit about who Autotrader is. So Autotrader wasn't born digital. And in fact, it began as a magazine almost 50 years ago, and we had to figure out digital decades later. So today we're one of the largest automotive marketplaces in the UK, possibly the largest. And now we have a 100% digital strategy. So we operate a marketplace primarily. We build data platforms to connect the different parts of our ecosystem, and we enable, most importantly, digital retailing, which is the omnichannel purchasing of cars. A digital marketplace, and not only an automotive marketplace, is quite complex. So it's many-sided, it's primarily dual-sided, but even more than that, we have information and data flowing through our platform from dealerships, manufacturers, finance houses, and logistics companies. We have to keep all of that running smoothly, and we're really, really ambitious about our commercial goals. But the challenge is we are almost half a century old, and decades of built-up accumulated systems and processes has left us with a really complex operational reality. And generally, our internal products that run the business haven't kept pace with those commercial digital products. So we've seen patterns like multiple tools and admin systems that duplicate capability. They became disconnected, and over time, we found that our operational reality didn't really enable or empower our very ambitious commercial digital strategy. It's fragmented, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, this might sound familiar to you. Well, maybe a little bit hopefully if you're here at this conference. Nor would it be unfamiliar, the aspirations for us to be a little bit more like those digital-born organizations. The question that we faced 18 months ago is, how do we align a complex operational reality with an ambitious strategy, also keeping everything running smoothly? And that's what Stuart and I set out in November 2023 to try to figure out.
So why did we frame this as a CX modernisation strategy rather than perhaps CX strategy or CX transformation? Firstly, CX strategy is typically focused more outwards towards customers. There's certainly work to be done improving the customer experience at Autotrader, but we realised early on this wasn't our primary challenge. Our challenge was more foundational: improve the internal tools and systems so that Autotrader teams can serve customers better at scale. Secondly, the word transformation didn't really come up in our early conversations. We didn't have a clearly defined endpoint for the work, and the Autotrader leadership were actually very supportive of this. They acknowledged that decades of accumulated tools and systems would take several years to sort out. Transformation also sounds like the kind of thing that a consultant like myself might say. And Autotrader are a very no-nonsense organisation, and quite rightly don't like things being done to them. Transformation might have triggered a bit of a cynical immune response from the organisation. Finally, there's a practical aspect. For any kind of change, you need some sort of flag to fly under, preferably one that feels contemporary and doesn't trigger memories of past efforts and invoke change fatigue. CX modernisation had the right feel, it acknowledged what existed whilst promising to make it better. And it put CX in there, most importantly, without asking anyone to abandon what they already knew about the business. So what exactly are we modernising? In simple terms, we're modernising organisational capabilities. Again, in simple terms, we can define these as specific things that Autotrader can consistently do as a business. Most enterprises have been through one or more historical transformation cycles. Each transformation cycle leaves behind a stack of capabilities. For example, digital may have given us e-commerce, content management systems and analytics. Agile gave us cross-functional teams, iterative delivery and product thinking. Data gave us lakes, platforms, data products, data lakehouses even, and so on. More recent transformations tend to leave behind fewer mature capabilities. Why is this? Because enterprises are still trying to digest the previous wave whilst also trying to absorb the next one. Agile capabilities are likely just maturing as you're implementing data transformation. Data capabilities are not ready when CX transformation arrives. With modernisation, we try to break things down into clear, meaningful options. We focus on developing and improving both new and old capabilities and ensuring that each of them can repeatedly deliver specific useful outcomes for Autotrader. Transformation promises linear change, but the reality is the work is never done. Much better to think of capabilities developed over time. There's always going to be new ones to consider, and existing ones will always need to be revisited and refreshed. We're building muscles that get stronger through continuous use, not trying to reach some final transformed state. Modernising what already exists is harder than launching a new product. With something new, you can start somewhat fresh from day one. But when you're modernising, you need to understand what you're working with first. In an organisation with accumulated systems, processes, and knowledge, that understanding doesn't exist in any single place or person. We need to make the organisation legible by choosing language that could easily be shared by everyone, much in the way that Edgy does. Broadly, this broke down into 4 concepts for us: use cases, pain points, capabilities, and journeys. Use cases proved to be a good starting point, as this provided us with a way to describe what was needed in terms that both the organisation and some of the technology suppliers we had to work with could understand. By conducting interviews with as much of the organisation as possible, we were able to describe use cases in a standardised way. The interviews also allowed us to understand where things were painful for people in the organisation right now. These became pain points, which we summarised into 6 key themes to remind everyone of what we were solving for and why. Those themes were conversation visibility, story stitching, contact housekeeping, fragmented processes, worker independence, and unnecessary admin. When it came to the solutions, we needed to do the reverse and actually break them down into capabilities to understand what we're solving with and how. Finally, we were committed to introducing service design as a way to help people think more broadly about the operational context. For this, we used journeys as a way for us to be clear about where we were attempting to solve things. When combined, these 4 concepts gave us a systematic view of modernisation. Use cases and pain points showed us our problems, capability showed our assets and constraints, and journeys showed us the end-to-end flow we needed to optimise within. Before we broke things down, our original strategy had 3 initiatives: a new CRM platform, new contact data model, and the introduction of service design. We started on the shiny new stuff, CRM and service design, but overlooked the importance dealing first with legacy data and processes. This is one of the early lessons on the danger of momentum, which Maggie will talk about later. We had started making progress implementing the new CRM and identifying processes, but underlying data problems put that all at risk. Customer records were inconsistent, duplicated across systems, and missing key information that the new CRM platform would need. We had to go back a step, put in place a plan for managing contact data so we could actually move forward again. Our breakdown of what is included in an organizational capability ended up looking a little bit different from people, processes, and tools. Since data was the biggest challenge, we decided to put that first and ended up with this improvement cycle. Fixing the data would drive our ability to exploit new tools. New tool adoption by employees would drive process improvement through ease of use and automation. And improved processes, in turn, would drive up the data quality and so on. We put the people part of in the middle of all this, the pain points that I just mentioned that we learned about from our research. This cycle diagram was a useful way to keep all of these in mind at once.
Despite the focus on tech solutions, it was also really essential that our colleagues bought into the change. So we wanted to understand how to measure their experience and not just their satisfaction. So we turned to behavioral science for this. So we chose a model called COM-B as our diagnostic framework. Now the COM in COM-B stands for capability, opportunity, and motivation that drives behavior. So capability is, I know about this thing and I can do it. We needed to ask ourselves, do our people have the skills and knowledge required to do the tasks we want them to do? Opportunity is, I have what I need to perform the behavior or task, and others in the organization approve of me doing this. Are the tools, time, and organizational support in place? And motivation is what it says on the tin. I want to do this behavior. Do the people see the value and feel incentivized to perform the behavior? So we found COM-B really useful because it allowed us to again break things down, particularly what was going on with our colleagues, much like we were breaking down the organization into capabilities. So we sent a diagnostic survey out to the entirety of Autotrader, and the results confirmed that whilst people definitely had the skills and the motivation, our tools and processes were really poor and we're underserving them. So this sounds like bad news, but it did confirm we were on the right track. We weren't lacking capability and motivation, which would have been quite bad news, but we were holding our people back from delivering great experiences by the complexity that we talked about earlier in the presentation and that we'd identified.
So EDGI provides three fundamental facets for looking at enterprise design: identity, architecture, and experiences, which obviously intersect to create organization, product, and brand. So far, we've really been looking at architecture and experience parts of enterprise design. Our architecture work included the improvement cycle, capability mapping, making the organization as a whole legible. Our experience work covered journeys, behavioral design, and employee interviews. But part of any strategy is also knowing what you won't do. And the part that we didn't focus on was identity. Partly this was a practical choice to avoid any conflict with another identity-focused work stream that was running at the same time. Internally, Autotrader has quite a clear sense of identity. They're very engineering-led and focused on delivering products to market faster than their competitors. Having an inside-out mindset is actually key to their success so far, at least as far as employees are concerned. So it was neither our remit to shift to an outside-in customer-centric identity, nor would it have helped us achieve our goals. Focusing on where we would make the most impact ensured that our work would complement rather than conflict with any future identity work. This is enterprise design in practice, recognizing what needs attention, where you have leverage, and having the discipline to stay within set boundaries. So we've covered the CX modernization strategy and some of the concepts and practices behind it, but as we all know, the real learning starts when theory meets operational reality. 18 months of actual work have revealed some interesting patterns around decision-making, journey mapping, and measuring progress. And I'll hand over to Maggie for the first of these.
So one of the biggest risks that we encountered was the danger of momentum itself. That's that feeling probably everyone recognizes when you start moving in a particular direction, organizational inertia kicks in and you feel like you have to keep going. So organizations can typically have two blunt responses to this. They dig in and keep going, even though there might be surmounting evidence that you're on the wrong track, or you stop too early with limited evidence and cut your losses with frequent pivots. So Autotrader in our history, we've experienced both kinds of responses. So we knew in this project we needed to find some balance and ensure that we could take on something really big without ignoring problems and challenges and digest the evidence that was coming in. So we learned to be very deliberate about decision types. So this is the concept is popularized to one of the big tech companies, one-way door versus two-way door decisions. So we had to be really clear when we're making decisions that when it was a one-way door, it's something difficult and expensive to reverse. This was like our major platform choices. Other things were two-way door. There's something we could try, learn, we could change course relatively easy, gather some evidence. Tool selection for us felt really urgent. We wanted to replace our CRM, but it was actually a two-way door decision. Whereas our data architecture, on the other hand, was one-way door. If we got that wrong, we would be stuck with the consequences for years. So understanding as a team which types of decision we were making would change the amount of time we maybe spent on it, evidence that we gathered, people that we brought into the room. The second facet that we added to this decision-making framework was persistent versus contextual. So persistent being something is going to create ongoing constraints. Or contextual where they're only mattering in specific situations. So our data model, again, was persistent. It was going to affect every subsequent capability down the line. Whereas when we came to the choice of which team we were going to pilot a new tool with, this was contextual. It was important in that moment in order to gain some of that momentum, but it wasn't precedent setting at all. So persistent decisions and one-way door decisions require more debate. You want to get more stakeholders involved. You'll do more scenario planning. Your contextual decisions you make faster with less ceremony. It's a smaller group of people. The key is recognizing which type that you're making.
Slide missing. I'll talk over it anyway. Doing journeys our way. So early on, we knew that customer journeys would be central to our efforts. We could see how excited people got when learning about them. Plus, the idea of CX is baked into using journeys. Rather than picking one method for creating journeys and sticking with it, we experimented to see what would actually help address our specific challenges. We tried multiple formats, approaches using tools like Miro and They Do, an enterprise journey management system. The problem that all these tools shared was the number of empty boxes that you had to fill in to complete a journey. The effort to do all this almost outweighed their usefulness for the organization. We learned that our description and use of journeys had to differ a little bit from some of these textbook approaches. Firstly, there's the nature of an automotive marketplace. Unlike e-commerce, where you control the entire transaction, customers were constantly moving between the Autotrader platform, dealer websites, manufacturer sites, finance comparison tools, insurance providers, and physical forecourts. Meanwhile, dealers, who are also customers, are on their own parallel journeys, uploading stock, managing inquiries, updating prices based on market conditions, coordinating with finance partners. These journeys intersect at critical moments, but trying to map them as linear sequences misses the true complexity of how automotive retail really works. This created a challenge for organizing journeys, trying to understand the relative hierarchy or importance across many different contexts and groups. Secondly, there's a need to use journeys as anchors for capability matching, helping us to decide what to deploy, where, when, and to whom for the most impact. This ultimately led us to go back to our very first principles and create a very simpler modular approach, assembling what we needed when in a very minimal way, rather than relying on too much top-down orchestration. Keeping things as simple as possible had a big impact on our ability to share the concept of journeys with everyone.
In the interest of time, I'm going to go to our takeaways, but I'm really disappointed not to be able to talk about vibes, so do ask me about it in the coffee break. Oh yeah, so I'll go to the last slide. So the three things we want you to leave with today is that Localize the language of change. So create those shared language and mental models. You can't modernize what you don't collectively understand. And I think we've heard that resoundingly through the conference today. Shared concepts create a common language that makes complex organizations readable. If you can spend the time getting the words right, it's essential mental infrastructure for any change effort. So beware the danger of momentum, practice that decision hygiene, talk about what type of decision making you're doing with your team. And just to talk about vibes, the slide that we missed, employee vibes matter. So use this thick data, what anthropologists call thick data, folk memory, everyday feelings of the people that you work with as a measure. It's as important as those quantitative measures we talked about in COM-B. Find those people who lived through past failures at an organization as they carry crucial context about what works and why. It provides a human intelligence layer that guides the context for change for the future. Thank you very much.